Ladies and gents, welcome back to another video. In front of me here is a package that I think has an iPad inside. Cannot remember what it is. I feel like that's the theme of all these videos. I buy stuff and then they sit and I don't open them in time. But let's get this thing opened up. Hopefully it's a cool old iPad. There are a few different models that I am waiting on. We'll see if this is one of them, but let's get this thing open. All right, here we go. We have ourselves an iPad 5th gen, and it is a little bit dirty. Let me give this a bit of a clean after we see if it needs to be charged or not. And it appears to be coming on. Let me go get my cleaning cloth and we'll get this thing taken care of. All right, so the display cleaned up pretty nicely. There are a few scratch marks on it. No cracks, and I'm really not seeing any deep scratches, but there are certainly a handful there. The bottom of the device is in good condition. That lightning port appears to be just fine. These corners look good. Volume buttons look good, as does the power button. So this is a really nice condition iPad 5th gen. And if you couldn't tell, we have what appears to be iOS 10, which is what this iPad launched with. So to be specific, this iPad came with 10.3 when it was released in March of 2017. It was sold for 1 year and then replaced in March of 2018. So we've actually still got Control Center down here at the bottom. This was back when Control Center had two tabs there. You could go back and forth. But let's head into settings and see which version we have on our 5th gen iPad here. So 10.3.2, so almost the very first version that you could get, just 0.2 versions away. This is a 32 gig model. This iPad shipped with 32 and 128 gigabyte capacities. So that is good to see. And there is no Apple ID, which is also fantastic. So I did not do my homework. So I've got my little cheat sheet here. That's got all the information. So the 5th gen launched with a dual core A9 processor. So that was clocked at 1.85 gigahertz. That's the same CPU that you would find in an iPhone 6S, 6S Plus, and even the iPhone SE first generation. That is a 14 nanometer CPU if you got the Samsung version, but if you got the TSMC version, that was a 16 nanometer. So some slight differences there depending on who manufactured that chip. This does have 2 gigabytes of LPDDR4 memory. And this was Apple's first real base configuration or entry budget model, whatever you want to call it, for the iPad. So up until this point, Apple would release the new iPad and then drop the price of the old one. They did that up until here, the release of this iPad 5th gen, which kept a very similar form factor to the original iPad Air with a non-laminated display. So it sounds very hollow to tap on. Compare that to a laminated display such as this iPad Pro. Feels much more sturdy. So this was a cheaper device. It launched with a price of $329 for 32 gigs and $429 for 128 gigs. So it's got some internals that are not the best. This iPad kind of launched by itself. It came out in March of 2017, so that was after the first gen iPad Pros came out, but it was before the second gen iPad Pros came out. So this device just kind of was dropped in there more or less at a random time point, and it was sold alongside the first gen iPad Pros, but it did not get iOS 9 because at this point we were already into the iOS 10 era for 2017. And those first gen iPads would be sold for some time more, but then they were replaced shortly after by the second gen 10.5 inch iPad, or that was the first of the 10.5 inch, the only 10.5 inch iPad, and the second gen 12.9 inch iPad. The iPad Pro naming scheme is all over the place. It's really, really messy. But this device came out with iOS 15 and it gets updates all the way through the latest release of iPad OS 16. So that's a pretty good run. This is one of the few iPads that does not have Apple Pencil support. So the 6th gen introduced that, but the 5th gen here does not. And this is, I believe, one of the last dual-core processors that Apple ever made. This is, of course, that dual-core A9 chip. Very capable on iOS 10, 11, 12, and really once you get into iOS 15 and 16 is when this thing kind of starts to slow down, especially with only 2 gigabytes of memory. We should have no problems getting the App Store to load. We have some issues on iOS 6, 5, and 4, but iOS 10 should be just fine. I have not experienced any issues with this. I have heard that iOS 11 does have some issues, and I think the reason for that is because there is no iOS device that ultimately ends its support on iOS 11. If it got iOS 11, it also got iOS 12. So iOS 11 seems to kind of be a forgotten update that is not supported anymore. But iOS 10 is where the iPhone 5, 5C, and the iPad 4th gen ended support, so should still be working just fine. But as you can see here, Apple's website on Safari does not look very good. It's kind of all over the place, and I would not recommend using this product to surf the web or certainly not make any purchases. But it is very smooth, and it feels like it's running just fine. I was not a fan of the iOS 10 Control Center. I think they really messed that up, and I think they realized it because they switched it back shortly afterwards. Let's check out some of these iOS 10 wallpapers. This is not really something we get to see very often unless you've got an iPhone 7 or 7 Plus. I've done a few of those reviews on the channel, but iOS 10 is pretty hard to come by. So we've got really limited selection. I mean, it literally all fits in this row here. It looks like we've got 15 wallpapers, and we've got some very nice two-tone ones down here. I think these look fantastic. We're gonna set it as this, and I like that on the home screen. That looks super clean. Here's the stock iOS 8 wallpaper, stock iOS 9. The iOS 9 wallpaper looks really nice. I don't know if that's because it's a nice picture or if it's because finding an iOS 9 Apple product like as an original version is so difficult because they all have activation issues. But I am not a fan of the iOS 10 wallpaper. I don't know why, but I just don't think it looks very good. We do have the planets, which do look very nice, and they complement the black display very well. But I think I'm gonna have to go with this iOS 9 one. We're gonna see how that looks here. On the home screen, that looks super clean, very nice. Matches a lot of the colors of the applications really well. And on our lock screen, that looks very clean and very nice as well. So one thing I do wanna do is show you guys the camera quality. So this is an 8 megapixel lens, and I'm pretty sure it is stuck at 1080p 30 FPS, and it is, so you can do 1080p or 720p. There is no slow motion and there's no HDR video, but let me go ahead and get a video recording rolling here, and then we'll switch over here to the iPad so you guys can see how that looks. Here is the setup, got the main iPhone there, and this is like super zoomed in. I am holding this as far back as I can go, and that's the only view we get. So right here is the same view as our iPhone. So the field of view on this camera is really bad, and here is my main iPad, and let's see if we zoom in. Is it gonna get super grainy? It does get pretty grainy. That's what you get with an 8 megapixel lens. So there is the video and the audio quality from our iPad 5th gen. We've got some graded cards here. You can see those look kind of grainy as well. There's no image stabilization here on this iPad, so it is very shaky. As you can tell, I'm trying to hold it as still as possible. Do not recommend recording video on your iPad. And that is going to do it for our session. So let's go ahead and switch back. And there you guys got to see and hear how this 5th gen iPad looks and sounds. This is a pretty unique device, very overlooked. This one is in space gray. You could get it in silver, and I believe you could also get it in gold maybe, or I could be wrong about that. Actually, you know what? I'll just show you guys all the specs since we've got them right here on this wonderful application. So let's see what we've got for our information. I don't even know what I was talking about. Oh, the colors. Yeah, so you could get it in white, gold, space gray, and that's it. You could get those 3 colors. No smart connector, no Apple Pencil support. This is truly just a very basic entry-level configuration iPad. And it was overshadowed a year later by the iPad 6th gen, which introduced a quad-core CPU, much better graphics, and Apple Pencil 1st generation support, so a much better device. But still a cool product, kind of hard to find on iOS 10 just based on its release date. Not quite as hard as the iPad Pro 2nd gens, but it's still up there for being a very cool legacy iOS device to get. So that's gonna do it for this video. Leave me some comments down below if you still use an iPad 5th gen and how it's holding up for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.